prepared quite a bit to try to put this weekend together, and we're in the midst of it, and it's already almost done, mashallah. So we ask Allah to help us make the most of this last night and these last few hours that we have, mashallah. Sometimes Shaitan will work really hard at the end of your good deeds, at the end of these type of programs, to try to spoil the good that was accumulated up to this point. He'll allow other people to kind of benefit and just kind of leave them be until it matters the most at the end. And then try to kind of swoop in to spoil things when it matters the most, which is how we end things. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ. The Prophet ﷺ, he says deeds are going to be based on how they end. And that's why we know this on kind of on a larger scale. We try to make sure the best part of our life is the last part of our life. It's not necessarily an excuse to just like live how you want in your youth or throughout your life and then just try to be better when you're old, because we don't know when the last part of our life will be, right? But we do know that the last part of our life is very crucial, because deeds will be based on how they end and according to their seal. So same thing on a smaller scale, we want to try to finish strong. And when we do a deed, we do it wholeheartedly. We don't half step, and we try to go all the way and finish all the way till the end. So we've been doing our best to learn and to acquire benefit in this program. So we'll do our best to finish strong tonight and also in the morning and all the way until the final dua, inshallah. So from the zeal and the interest of the people and the brothers and the sisters who wanted to still hear from the Hayat Sahaba, the lives of the companions, because we had this session on the schedule, but the way it works is, sometimes there are casualties in the schedule. Sometimes there's casualties in the schedule just because of limited time. Have us, inshallah. So, we weren't able to necessarily read from the stories of the Sahaba because being scheduled after Isha, we had to accommodate some of the other programs. So here we are at the BoneFire, and we have an opportunity, inshallah, to read from them. The reason why it's so important to read about the lives of the companions is because the companions, may Allah be pleased with them, they were the living examples of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, he was a living example of the Quran. But the Sahaba, they were the living examples of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is a miracle both of the Prophet ﷺ and of the companions. Because number one, you needed a whole generation simply to capture the beauty of the Prophet ﷺ and to capture his life and all of the good that existed. Because when you look at all the good that exists in people, the Prophet ﷺ had all of it. People have different strengths, but the Prophet ﷺ, he had all the strengths. This was a part of his miracle. And the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, they were living examples of the Prophet ﷺ. So reading from their lives gives us a closer look at even the beauty of the Prophet ﷺ. He gives us an example about how to live as a community, because now you're not just looking at one life, but you're looking at many lives. You're looking at a community. You're looking at how they ran a society. You're looking at how they established institutes and bodies of learning. So this whole retreat has been about this concept of learning and respecting and maintaining that uninterrupted chain back to the Prophet ﷺ. Well, where did that link start? Where did that chain begin? We're going to read a story from the companions, inshallah, which discusses how the companions ensured that knowledge was transmitted to the Muslims that would come after them. This particular incident is regarding Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was the Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he was the leader of the faithful. Here it mentions,
إرسال عمر رضي الله عنه معاذا وعبادة وأبو الدرداء رضي الله عنهم إلى الشام. Qari Uthman, he spoke about some of these different companions who were scholars of the Quran that were sent to different parts of the world. Sheikh Umair also made a mention of this, if I'm not mistaken, in one of his talks also. Well, this was actually the story, or one of the stories that speak about it specifically. So it was narrated by Ibn Sa'd, أخرج ابن سعد والحاكم عن محمد بن كعب القرظي قال جمع القرآن في زمان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم خمسة من الأنصار. He mentions that there were 5 people that had memorized the Quran during the life of the Prophet ﷺ, that were from the Ansar, while the Prophet ﷺ was alive. So these were the only Huffaz amongst the companions, but they were the ones who had memorized it in its entirety during the life of the Prophet ﷺ while he was still alive. Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Ubadah ibn Samit, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, and Abu Darda radiallahu anhum. These are the 5 that are mentioned in this particular narration. And you'll read different narrations. Sometimes it was 4, sometimes it was 5, and sometimes other names were mentioned, as opposed to these 5 that were mentioned. فلما كان زمان عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه كتب إليه يزيد بن أبي سفيان رضي الله عنهما أن أهل الشام قد كثروا وربلوا وملأوا المدائن. So during the time of Sayyidina Umar, when he was the leader, Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan, who was the governor of Sham, the Levant. So Sham isn't just referring to Damascus, nor is it referring simply to Syria, but it was the Levant, before these, before these man-made borders were placed. So he requested from Sayyidina Umar and told Sayyidina Umar, we have grown tremendously in population and we filled up the cities, mashallah. وَاحْتَاجُوا إِلَى مَنْ يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْقُرْآنَ وَيُفَقِّهُهُم, that we need people that can teach them the Quran and also teach them understanding of the deen. فَأَعِنِّي يَا أَمِيرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ بِرِجَالٍ يُعَلِّمُونَهُم. So help me, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, with people who can teach them. This was the need now. They saw that when people are embracing Islam and as Islam was spreading, the one thing that you were going to need was someone who can teach. Because at the core of our faith is making sure that we understand things properly and that we do things properly. So he wrote to Sayyidina Umar, please send us some people to help teach the community. This should be the number one concern of the community when we live somewhere. Leadership, the residents, is we need people to teach. Look at all these people here. Look at all these, mashallah, youngsters who are going to grow up and need to be able to have access to answers to the questions they're going to have. Just because they don't ask doesn't mean they don't have questions. There's so much fitna and so many challenges that are facing the youngsters in our community today that we didn't have to deal with. And we need to be equipped to be able to address those questions that they have. And that should be our number one concern, is finding people then who can teach. This was the concern here to the Amir al-Mu'mineen. Please, A'inna, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? Help us with people yu'allimunahum, that can teach them. فَدَعَا عُمَرْ أُولَئِكَ الْخَمْسَةِ. So Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab, he sent for these 5 companions from the Ansar. He didn't restrict it now to like, all right, who's expendable. These were the 5, mashallah, gems from the Ansar, of the most learned from the Ansar. And he sent for these 5. فَقَالَ لَهُمْ إِنَّ إِخْوَانَكُمْ مِنْ أَهْلِ الشَّامِ قَدْ اسْتَعَانُونِي بِمَنْ يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْقُرْآنَ وَيُفَقِّهُهُمْ فِي الدِّينِ فَأَعِينُونِي رَحِمُكُمُ اللَّهِ بِثَلَاثَةٍ مِنْكُمْ. So he sent for these 5 from the Ansar, and he said, look, your brothers in Sham have requested my help to send people that can teach them the Quran and give them understanding and knowledge of deen. So you help me, right? Help me help you, right? So this is also the sign of a good leader, is to know how to allocate certain things and to go to the right people to help you when you need help. At the end of the day, it falls on your shoulders, but you don't have to necessarily do everything. You have to find those people that can help you get done what needs to get done. Sayyidina Umar said, help me to help them. I need 3 out of you 5. There's 5 of you. I need how many? I need 3. إن أحببتم فاستهموا وإن انتدب منكم 3 فليخرجوا. He said, if you like, you can draw lots out of the 5 of you so that 3 will go. Or if 3 of you volunteer, then the 3 of you can go. فقالوا ما كنا لنساهم. They said, we're not going to draw lots. We're not going to draw lots. هذا شيخ كبير لأبو أيوب. They looked at Abu Ayyub and saw, he's like, this guy's old. Abu Ayyub is old. Radiallahu anhu. And subhanAllah, being old didn't stop him from still going out, because he still wasn't buried in Medina. Right? I just got back from Istanbul, mashallah, from Turkey. And he's buried there in Istanbul, because even as in his old age, he was excused from having to go out. But he had this desire to go out in the way of Allah. And there's a famous hadith about Constantinople. Yes? لا تفتحن القسطنطينية فلنعم الأمير أميرها ولنعم الجيش ذلك الجيش. The Prophet ﷺ said, it's been narrated to have said, that Constantinople will be opened. And what an amazing general the general will be, and what an amazing army that army will be. The Prophet ﷺ prophesies this. And sure enough, the words of the Prophet ﷺ are true, yes? People knew that this was going to happen, and they desired it from the very early days of the Sahaba, that they wanted to be among the people that fulfilled this prophecy and brought the words of the Prophet ﷺ, the truth, and would be then included in the praise of that army because they were a part of that army. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari was among those companions that when he heard that this was going to be the case, he wanted to go in the way of Allah. Go with me. When the army was gathered to go to Constantinople to attempt to now open it, he went with them because he wanted to have that virtue. Did they conquer it? No, they did not. He would die on the way and ask them, bury me when you reach the farthest place possible. And they buried him right outside of the walls. Radiallahu anhu. So he's buried there now in Istanbul. And at that time it was called Constantinople. It wasn't conquered. This was during the times of companions, right? When was it finally conquered? Allahu Akbar. How many years is that after the time of the companions? How many years is that after the time of the companions? It's over 700 years later. Over 700 years later, they had such a fortified city. The Muslims tried generation after generation. And despite their strength and their numbers, they were not able to fulfill that hope of the Prophet ﷺ for 700 years. Until finally, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, raised a people and the great leader Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih, rahimahullah, who would become the Sultan at the age of 19. And the first thing that he does is plant his flag and say, we're going to Constantinople. And Allah gave the victory. That's a whole nother conversation, mashallah. As a 19-year-old general. So, Abu Ayyub, they looked at him and said, he's old, so he's not going to go. Then they looked at وَأَمَّا هَذَا فَسَقِيمٌ لِأُبَيْ بن كَعْبٍ. Then they looked at Ubay bin Ka'b and he's sick. Right, so that eliminates 2 out of 5. فخرج معاذ بن جبل وعبادة بن الصامت وأبو الدرداء رضي الله عنهم فقال عمر. So these 3 went, right? Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Ubadah ibn Samit, and Abu Darda. May Allah be pleased with them. فقال عمر ابدأوا بحمص. Go to Hims first. Right? This is a city north of Damascus, which was also a very rich seat of learning. throughout our Muslim history. نسأل الله العافية لأهل الشام ولأهل الحمص أهل دمشق ولجميع المسلمين في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. Right? That's where Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid is buried. And his masjid, his family was built there. And it was built there until it was also destroyed by some of these, mashallah, knuckleheads who claim to be Muslims and like did a lot of fitna over there. Allah help us all. So he said, Omar told the three of them, start in Hims. Go to Hims. فإنكم ستجدون الناس على وجوه مختلفة منهم من يلقنوا. He said, because you're going to find a lot of different types of people there, but you're going to find some very intelligent people there who memorize well. They're very intelligent and they are very capable of learning the deen. So start there. فإذا رأيتم ذلك فوجهوا إليه طائفة من الناس. Once you start to see that they're learning and acquiring this knowledge, then assign some of them to teach others. Right? That you start to teach and raise people to prepare them for the next generation to also take on this task. فإذا رضيتم منهم فليقم بها واحد. And when you feel that the work has reached a satisfactory level, one of you should stay with them, and then the other two should go. Go where? وَلْيَخْرُجْ وَاحِدٌ إِلَى دِمَشْقٍ وَالْآخَرُ إِلَى فِلِسْطِينَ. And then one of you should go to Damascus, and the other one should go to Palestine. This was the instruction of who? Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab. قدموا حمص فكانوا بها حتى راضوا من الناس. So they went to Hims and they stayed there until they reached a satisfactory level with the people. أقام بها عبادة. So Ubadah ibn Samit stayed with them there in Hims. ورجع أبو درداء إلى دمشق. And then Abu Darda went to Damascus. And he would stay there for the rest of his life teaching the Muslims. And he's buried there near the Suq Hamadiyah. And it's a very famous area of Damascus where you can go and visit his maqam there. Sayyidina Abu Darda radiallahu anhu. When I was living there, I was able to go and visit where he's buried, mashallah. But you see, kind of again as a side note of this,